Okay, great. All right, I call the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the
republic
for one nation under God,
indivisible,
liberty and justice
for all.
Okay. A motion, please, to approve the agenda.
I will.
Linda, second. Second, Paul. All right. Any discussion? All right, I'll call a quick roll then. John?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Tina?
Yeah.
Jason?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Right, approved. That's approved. At this time, I will ask for a motion to go into executive session for the purpose to discuss a legal matter and contracts of 6 specific employees. A motion, please.
So moved.
John, a second. Tina, any discussion? All right, a quick roll. No, let's start with John.
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Linda? Yes. Tina?
Yeah.
Jason?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
And myself, yes. So that motion is approved, and now we move into executive session. Tina will be leaving, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm leaving.
And when I do this,
In the railing.
yeah.
We're communing with nature here.
Lucinda,
Yes.
because of the time,
Yep.
4B, Bob was going to do a piece on some of the capital project paperwork or the
Oh,
what's changed form that we have.
yeah.
Do you want to postpone that to the next meeting?
Yeah, I can have these.
Oh, I don't. I'm really interested in that.
Okay,
I
we
mean,
can
I'm
do
only
it. I
one
just
guy,
want to make
and-
sure that
but
we
I'm
do
really
it justice.
Let's do some policy. Let's do some policies too.
Now, John,
I haven't eaten dinner yet, but I'm okay.
you're chair of that committee.
Paul, I guess I'm saying that it's not, we're not doing it. It would just be pushed off for another meeting to do it. Just I'm giving you a glimpse of what we, the information that we get in those meetings.
I'm just one of 6 guys, but I'm very interested.
I'd like to hear as well.
Leave it in.
Okay, we'll do it.
Tina, is the public in?
Yes.
All right. Then we're back in regular session. We will do number 4, committee reports. Audit committee, Linda, Paul, and I said.
The audit committee met with Lisa and she reviewed the final 3 sheets, but we took a look at the differences in some of the issues last year and this year, and there was an increase in numbers. Lisa did say that there was a change in some of the steps and protocols at BOCES, and that there was a new person in that position, so that may have been a factor as well. In looking at the kinds of reasons that things had to be sent back or amended, many of them were very similar to the ones that we've had before, and maybe will continue because someone just forgets to submit information prior to PO in a timely manner with correct information. So we accepted that. We're certainly going to be keeping an eye on that again next year. And Paul, feel free to add any more information if you want.
Okay, specifically with regard to an improvement plan, Bob was going to talk to the CBO at BOCES, and then Lisa was also going to work with her counterpart to to try to drive these areas back significantly down. There was a measurable increase this year. So we have a training plan going forward.
Okay, thank you. Bob, capital project budget information?
I'm going to try to share my screen right now. And what I'm displaying now is a sheet that we get every week in our OACM meeting. It's something I asked campus to create probably about a year ago. It's not all color coded. I've done that to show you what it is. But basically what you're looking at now, this bottom paragraph actually is a piece that I shared with you last week. And it looks familiar. You've seen the last few weeks. I've talked about how our contingency has gone down at different times and given you just a summary of kind of why it's gone down. The information that I'm sharing in this paragraph, going forward as I share things with you, I'm not going to necessarily give you the paragraph. I'm going to give you this actual sheet. So I want to break it down and let you see the information that we get from campus every week. So there's an original amount column here. Anytime an issue comes to the attention of the team, generally through an RFI or RFP process, we have asked campus for the last year and a half, we want to account for it in the budget. Whether it ends up costing us money down the road or not, because we were having budget issues early on, we said we need to start identifying them and kind of worst case scenario, be conservative and plan that we're going to be spending some money. So what happens is when an issue comes up, it goes on this list and campus assigns it the best value that they can at the time. We may or may not have information from contractors, but they have to estimate what it will cost. The second column is what has changed from where we were carrying it before. So I'm going to walk you through what happened last week in that color code. So first of all, my first paragraph that I gave you, or first sentence, said that our contingency went down by 43,000 and change, which you can see here in yellow at the bottom. When you get the budget summaries every week, and bear with me 1 second while I try to share that. Well, I'm not going to waste time trying to figure that out. But at the bottom, when we see the contingency number remaining, if we don't use the savings that we were trying not to spend, that goes down by this amount every week. As I said, we asked campus to start doing this because every week we would see our contingency number go down. We would say, wait a minute, why? So this shows what happened from one Wednesday to another. $43,000 is what our contingency went down in 1 week. And I said some of that was in the blue. We recovered funds of a little over $2,000 from 2 items. So if we look up here at these 2 items that are in the light blue, these are items that didn't just come up last week. We've known about them for some time, and we were carrying in the budget for this RFP roofing 29, we were carrying $1,527.50 in the budget. Again, our best estimate of worst case scenario. What ended up happening eventually is that we decided we did not need to do that work. So therefore, when we came into the meeting this week, the amount we're going to carry in our budget going forward is 0. And if you come over to this third column, that means we are to the plus $1,527.50 for that item for that 1 week. Additionally, we had roofing number 30 RFP. And originally we had $1,000 estimated as what we could reserve in the budget to spend for that. The actual quote from the contractor came in, we're accepting it at just over $500. So that's a situation where pricing came in better than we expected. So again, we're recovering a little bit of money back to the positive in our budget. When you combine those two items, that's where we come up with the $2,014. The opposite happens at times, and I'm going to skip down to the green. In my paragraph at the bottom, it said we had two items where we had reserved funds. So you can see these green numbers. We originally had reserved $250 here. We originally reserved $3,200 here. But when we got actual quotes, they came in higher amount. We had reserved $250. The price is going to cost us $466. So that means we went backwards, or we burned another $216 there from what we were carrying in the budget. Similar down here, we were carrying $3,200 in the budget. The cost is really going to be a little over $3,400. So we lost another $200 of contingency there. In red, it says there's 4 new items identified. So as you look at the items that are in red up here, the original amount is blank. So when you get this in the future and you see that there's blank for the original amount, that means that's an item that we were not tracking money for in the past. But now it's come up, and we have to put the best estimates that campus can give us at the time. So that's when you had nothing in the budget for this, and now we're thinking we may need $2,500. That's how we burned $2,500 of contingency. $6,000 here, 29 and 9 here. So I'm going to pause and see if any of that made sense or if there's questions. Make sense?
It made sense because it's still got to say that.
Sure.
But the questions actually, Bob, are on the project budget summary.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing this one. Let me see if I can pull that up. Is this the sheet you're referencing, Paul?
Absolutely, right on.
Okay. So this number here showing our remaining contingency of $16,000, that's the number that a week before was around $50,000.
Yeah.
But as I just demonstrated, how and why it went down 43,000 to this new 16.
Yep, I got it. So the questions that I have are the 304, so the line right above that, the 304, 401. Yes, sir. Now that, we can all read it. That to me is like an extra contingency, or that's what I'm really asking. Is that money that we have, or, and we already know from Kevin's presentation, was it last week, that he's planning on spending some of that. But is that money right now, we've still got 304, 401?
That is correct. That is correct. So that's why the number above, in their mind, they're really saying we've got 320 of contingency.
And does that, so I understand and thank you. Now, going over to that white box to the right where your arrow is, just a little bit further to the right. Now, where does that fall? Is that?
That's where this 304,000 comes from.
Oh, not the two above it?
Oh, I'm sorry, I have to move my Skype box off of it.
I think the
That is not that, okay, what that is that is not factored into those numbers at all. As you know, we have not come up with an agreed upon number for Kalia and Foz when we canceled the elementary school work. We have not agreed on what the credit back should be.
Right.
Because we need to take a conservative approach, we are carrying in our budget their number. If we get our number, we would have that much more money. But we have to assume, worst case scenario, that if we have to settle at that other number. Does that make sense?
Well, let me see if it makes sense. So right now, that 839 and the 128, we've actually, that's part of the two lines above it. We may end up getting more, but we've already captured that savings. The worst case.
Worst case scenario is what's over here, the 320.
Okay.
Worst case scenario. If the change directives that we issue and we end up only having to pay that price, then we could recoup additional money of $1 million almost.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay, and I will begin this week distributing that form out to you with the other information I give you.
I think it's important to note, I know it's just terminology, but it's really important to note that we're the ones who spend that money. So either the board approves it, or we approve it, I approve it, Mike will approve it, but they can't go forward and do any of those changes without us saying, we agree to spend that money.
One other topic I needed to briefly touch on tonight. End of June, of course, as I mentioned back in my dashboard, and you've seen on the agenda, this is the time of year when we analyze what we estimate as potential surplus funds from the end of the year, and the board takes action to place them into reserves. And it's tough because we have to do that before the year closes June 30th, but yet we don't know exactly how much money we're going to have till we get through closing on the books. There's all kinds of things that go on through the month of July. Then we get into the audit, and it's August and into September sometimes before we know that final number. So as I've mentioned before, we use wording of up to give us coverage. And I usually estimate that number higher than what I think we're actually going to have after I talk with the treasurers. So I've put the resolution forward and I mentioned it in my dashboard. Since that time, I got a new monthly report from the central business office, and the projection on some fund balance at the end of the year actually is up some from where it was a month ago. Additionally, there was money that we're appropriating, as you know, towards next year of $250,000. And the estimate that he had given me the month before, he had already taken into account that we were going to be using $250,000 of our surplus when he gave me last month's number. I wasn't aware of that. I actually took the number he gave me and said, well, I know 250 is going to go towards appropriating next year's budget. So the bottom line is there is a possibility that we may have more than what I've stated in that resolution. Actually, our best estimate right now has it within about $30,000 or $40,000 of what I put forth on the resolution, which is really too tight. We have been spending a little less, as we've talked about during COVID. Basically, his estimate changed about $100,000 in the last month just due to spending less. So generally, I would come back and say, before you act on this tonight, I would recommend that you increase the capital project reserve, the amount up to that you can put in there, because in accordance with our funding and use of reserves policy, which we've talked about and formally gets updated tonight, in accordance with that, we want to keep funding that aggressively towards the future for future capital project work. The one negative to putting that money there, it's great to have it there so that when we do another capital project, we have money to address the local share. The one problem with putting it there is once it's in there, that's all it can be used for. Of course, you know, it needs voter authority to be established. Once money goes in there, it can only be used for a capital project with voter authority. The concern I have right now is lack of flexibility with our current situation. As you know, we built a budget with projected revenues of state aid being flat. And as you also know, that is a best case scenario. There's a strong possibility of some mid-year reductions in state aid. It would be nice to be able to have the flexibility to access some of that money that is left from this year if we get a mid-year cut in aid. Instead of having to go and cut positions in the middle of the year, we would rather have some of this money to use towards that. The only way to really be able to do that is to go above the 4% that we are allowed to keep in unappropriated fund balance. So as you know, up to 4% of the following year's budget is always held in unappropriated fund balance. That's, you know, if you remember from your fiscal training, kind of like your only little savings account that you can tap into, because it's not a reserve that has specifications of how and when it can be spent. I would never suggest holding more than 4% if we were not in a very rare situation where we really have no idea what our ability is to get revenue from the state for next year. And if we have any flexibility with some extra money that we could hold in unappropriated fund balance that we would have access to, now would be the one time to consider going over that 4%.
What happens
Scott?
if,
Yeah. Go ahead.
what happens if we're not supposed to?
Well, I'm sure that our auditors will cite it in our report.
That's it?
Pretty much.
A future comptroller's report might be a hand slap. But if you don't make have it as a pattern, it's not going to be an issue, especially if you're doing it in this year and have the messaging be because of the unstable nature of the state budget. Bob and Mike and I talked about it and felt that certainly it wouldn't be appropriate for me to say, yeah, go ahead and do it. I'm out the door. I don't have any responsibility for it. But I certainly would support Mike and Bob and their thinking because essentially I don't think North Rose-Wolcott will be the only district doing this going into next year. I'm certain that there will be a number of districts that will be keeping funding beyond the 4% for that main purpose of stabilizing their revenues.
What does that extra amount to, if your best guess?
Well, as I said, right now, what I've got written in the resolution is really close to the best estimate we've got. So it might be a couple hundred more, maybe up to 400,000, but that's really just a stab. I don't think it will be that high.
Okay.
I mean, this is, you know me, I'm a rule follower, but I also know that we are in uncharted territories, and I felt it was only fair to make the board aware of different strategies and how they could play out. Yes, Paul?
Yeah, okay, yeah, Bob, can we, so, let's say we end up and state aid stays flat. Could we use that money to perhaps pay a teacher aid? Is that the flexibility that we have for a teacher?
To do what?
Okay. If we, that unappropriated fund balance,
Yep.
if we actually end up with state aid remaining flat through the rest of the year, best case, and we have some excess money, may we use that to hire a teacher or a teacher aide?
Well, we still can't spend more than the dollar amount that's authorized in the budget. This is not to increase spending, it's to cover lost revenue. And if it's not needed, it would just be extra at the end of the next year when we go through the process again and decide what to do with extra funds at the end of the year.
So you could lower the tax levy next year. If it's not used at all, if the governor doesn't take, the SED doesn't take the money.
But
It can be
if
used
it's
as part
not
of-
taken and we don't have the same concern a year from now,
Right.
then I probably would recommend at that point that you would put it into the capital reserve, which is
Oh,
what I
okay.
normally would recommend now. But I'm
So you
just
could-
saying, let's hold off a year.
Okay, so you can do that at any time then.
Sure.
I think it's a good plan. It's a good, solid plan. We've heard what Albany is thinking about doing if the Senate doesn't give a chunk of money to each state. So I think it's coming that we're not going to have a stable tax rate, a tax levy. I think it's going to be a decrease in the middle of the year, which is going to be hard to take. That's going to really be a punishment. So I'm in favor of it.
I agree.
Sounds like, anyone else?
I think it's a good way to go.
Okay, Gina? Okay, I think Paul? Did
I'm okay with it.
I heard you, right, Jason?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
So
we're
I-
good with-
So I will leave that resolution as it's written. We won't change it before you adopt it. And just again, I'll say it will show up on our audit. So next fall, when we review that report, so people look at me and go, Bob, what are you doing? This is a conscious decision we've made. And in our corrective action plan is where we'll address that this is a conscious decision based on this set of data at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Good news. Does anyone want to share some good news?
Finger Lakes Times had a listing with pictures of all the graduating classes in the Ontario and Wayne County and whoever else. And our kids were all there. Nice picture.
I actually have a whole slew of good news because we've been kind of stacking it up. But it can also be deferred to the next meeting. And I think I'd kind of like to do that, except with two items. One is, Scott, I don't mean to catch you off guard, but I think it's really good news that we're going to have a ceremony this Friday. Would you want to expand on that at all?
I was planning on doing that, but that's a good segue, Paul. I appreciate that. So once we found out a week or so ago that, or a couple weeks maybe, that the governor was going to allow outdoor ceremonies not to exceed 150 people. Scott moved to work with his but at class advisors and with us, and started planning first by asking students at that point, do they want to have one single ceremony or two split ceremonies where they could have family members with them, or to push the ceremony off to July, hoping that there would be more allowable people at the ceremony. It was close, but more favorable to having all of their classmates together. That was by and large where people wanted, or where the students wanted to go, those who responded. And so after that, Scott had put out a survey to find out who wished to be there. In the meantime, we heard of another district using a possible plan to that was similar in size with us, where they couldn't put their students and two parents on the field for the whole ceremony, but they could have their students on the field and then bring in parents to observe their child receive their diploma, be able to be there to witness that portion, be able to take pictures. And so the plan is to stage the parents in the parking lot to bring them out in shifts so they can see their kids get their diplomas. But we'll have the regular ceremony abbreviated a little bit because that's what the recommendations are. Students and parents, staff will have to wear masks, except for when the student goes up to get their diploma or to present their diploma for pictures. Otherwise, socially distanced with masks, all of the procedures that are expected of any kind of gathering.
Thank you for doing that.
Oh, it's a team effort, but hopefully it'll be, we're praying for good weather, at least for one of the nights, but hopefully Friday, because you can't count on people not having plans for the next night. So we're, again, hoping to have most of the graduates there. We haven't heard back from all of them yet, but those that have responded, the majority are planning on being there.
Scott, are you still looking for volunteers?
I have to check with Scott. I know that he people had reached out to him, and he was reaching out to others. A lot of staff, because we're going to have limited number of staff on the field, so that we can afford to have more parents. So I'll check if there's a need. I'll certainly let you know.
Yeah, if there's a need, I want to raise my hand as a volunteer. So Cinda, if I can have just a couple, I know it's late, but because Scott's going to leave us, I wanted to point out that he made the Finger Lakes Times. Excuse me, this is the Lakeshore News, on a really nice article, Scott, about the budget, the whole issue about budget. And then Scott Bradley had a nice article again in the Lakeshore News. I want to cover just a couple of people that have graduated from universities. And also a quick note on Haley Tabor received a Transform Leadership Award from Cazenovia College, which includes more than grades. And so, of course, she's from North Rose. I had a couple other graduates here. Lindsay Wilkie of North Rose, a Master of Science in Art Therapy from Nazareth College. And then I have a whole host of students that made Dean's List or President's List. I think we can defer that to the next meeting, but I still do want to read out their names.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Paul. All right. We'll move on to the consent agenda. A motion, please, to approve the consent agenda. Linda, a second. Paul, discussion on the consent agenda. All in favor of approving the consent agenda? I'll take a quick roll, starting with John. You're muted, Jen. Okay.
Yes.
Linda,
Yes.
Tina,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
motion is carried. That takes us through the end of the agenda, does it not? Yes, it does. And so, other time permitting, we have, you know, all the rest of the evening. Do you want to stay and talk?
Lucinda, I just wanted to say a quick thank you, since this is my last board meeting that I'll be at. Thank you to everybody. It's been a joy to be here, and I've really grown to love the North Rose-Wolcott School District.
Well, thank you, Scott. And we so much appreciate you being here. I know you didn't, never could have anticipated the issues you were going to be dealing with when you took us on, but we're so glad you were here to lead us through it. And it's been for the board, it's been a joy to work with you. Thank you for it. Anyone? Okay. At this time, then, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Linda, and a second.
Tina.
Tina? Tina Reed, all in favor, raise your hand, goodbye.
Thank
And
you,
I'll-
Scott. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
He's waving too.
And thank you, Tina.
Meeting is adjourned.
Hey.
Night all, you may press your leave button.